Good morning and welcome back to my kitchen. Today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some meals that we had throughout the week this week and some recipes from my homestead kitchen. I'm starting out today with cooking up a pork roast, and I'm going to be slow cooking this for some pulled pork. So I have a pork shoulder roast, just under 3 pounds, that I'm getting into my crock pot. And for seasonings on this pork roast, I'm just kind of using up some stuff that I had in the fridge. So I had almost an entire jar of some home canned apple butter that just wasn't getting used, and I wanted to make sure that that was not going to go to waste. So I am using all of that along with a little bit of Dijon mustard and some apple cider vinegar. And I'm just going to pour that over the top of the pork roast, and that is going to slow cook all day in my crock pot. I'm just going to have that on low heat for about 8 hours, and as it gets closer to that 8-hour mark, it is just going to start to fall apart and become really tender. I feel like pulled pork always needs some sort of slaw to go along with it, so I'm making up a really simple cabbage slaw today. And for the dressing, I'm just using a little bit of my homemade avocado oil mayonnaise along with some apple cider vinegar, some Dijon, and I'm going to season that with a little bit of salt and pepper. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit of our honey to sweeten that up as well. Now, as I said, this is going to be a very simple slaw, so I'm just using green cabbage, and I'm not going to be adding anything else into that today. You could definitely add in some shredded carrot if you wanted, some onion, green onion, fresh herbs. All of that are always great additions. However, I'm just keeping this really, really simple. So I have an entire head of green cabbage that I'm slicing up. I ended up only using about half of this for the slaw, and that gave us still a good amount of leftovers for the next day as well. So I'm just going to pour that dressing over top of the cabbage, stir that together well, and that is going to sit in the fridge. And I feel like this is something that just gets better the longer that it sits. So I'm making that in the morning as I have that pork slow cooking, and it'll be ready at dinner time. We're going to be having that pulled pork on top of some baked sweet potatoes. So I'm just getting those washed up really well. I'm leaving the skin on these, and then I'll get them dried. I like to just puncture them a few times with a fork to release some of that steam as they cook. And then I'm drizzling over top a little bit of olive oil, some salt. I'll massage that all in, and those are just going to bake in a 400-degree oven for probably about 45 minutes to an hour. This pulled pork turned out great. It gave us a ton, so we're having this for dinner. We'll have some leftovers in the fridge, and I'm going to be freezing a little bit as well to pull out for a quick meal another day. I'm just serving some of that pulled pork on top of the baked sweet potato with some of the slaw on the side, and the apple butter was definitely a good choice. That was a great way to use up some stuff that I had in the fridge that I needed to get through, and the flavor of apple and pork, as always, just pairs really well together. I had a couple bananas that were getting really spotty, which means it's the perfect time to use them for baking. So I'm making up a batch of zucchini muffins, and I like to use bananas in them. You could also use applesauce. I'll be sure to leave the recipe in the description box down below, but the bananas just help to sweeten them without adding a ton of extra sugar. So I'm just getting those bananas mashed up and adding in a few eggs as well. This is a gluten-free recipe. It is a muffin recipe that I make with oat flour, and so I always like to use lots of eggs in those recipes just to make sure that they hold together really well. I'm also adding in a little bit of melted butter and some maple syrup. I do just a 1/4 cup, so these are not a super sweet muffin, but this is kind of my preference. And then I'm just gonna get all of those wet ingredients whisked together really well, and then I'll add in the dry ingredients, and this is a 1-bowl recipe. To make these muffins gluten-free, I'm using oat flour as the base of them, so I'm just adding that in there along with lots of baking powder. I'm gonna add in a little bit of salt and some cinnamon, and then get that all whisked together, and then I stir in the shredded zucchini. This is a great recipe to make to use up zucchini when you have a ton coming in from the garden, or if, like me, you've got a bunch in the freezer from last year's garden season. Now, I left these plain today, but oftentimes I will add in some chocolate chips or some chopped nuts as well. I like to use muffin liners when I'm using my cast iron muffin pans. They do tend to stick, especially in a recipe like this that doesn't have a ton of fat in it, but you can just grease a pan really well. And then I'm dividing that batter evenly between all of the muffin cups, and those are gonna bake in a 375-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes until they're lightly golden. Often I share videos here on my channel where I do a weekly restock and I do a bit of meal prep to set us up for the week ahead. And something that is often included in those videos is me cooking up a frozen chicken in the Instant Pot to have some easy protein on hand. And this is one of the ways that I utilize that protein throughout the week. So I am making some chicken enchiladas tonight for dinner, and I have that chicken shredded and ready to go, which makes this come together really, really quickly. So I'm just adding that chicken to a bowl alongside a little bit of Greek yogurt to make this a little bit more creamy, and I'm adding in some of my roasted green tomato salsa verde. I'm also adding in some roasted green chilies that I had from the garden last year that I had frozen. I'm going to stir that all together and then prep my corn tortillas. For corn tortillas, 9 times out of 10, I'll make homemade corn tortillas with masa. I have a tortilla press and I think they just turn out so much better, but it does, of course, take a little bit more effort. I just find that the store-bought ones tend to be a little bit dry. Oftentimes they kind of break apart, and it usually is worth extra effort to just make homemade tortillas. However, I had a package from the store that I needed to get used up, so that is what I'm using today. And I'm just heating each tortilla in a cast iron skillet for maybe about 10 seconds per side just to soften them up. I've added a little bit more of that salsa verde to the bottom of my baking dish, and then I'm just scooping some of that chicken mixture into each corn tortilla, rolling them up and placing them into the baking dish as well. I had a bit of that roasted green tomato salsa verde left over, and just to stretch that a little bit, I added a little bit more Greek yogurt to it, and I'm spooning some of that over top, and then I'm going to top this with a little bit of shredded sharp cheddar cheese, and these are going to go into the oven. Now, this meal really did not have a whole lot of veggies in it. I am making a black bean salad to go on the side, and usually I would include a lot more in this, but we're just kind of using what we've got. So I have a pint of home canned black beans that I have rinsed and drained, and I'm just adding that to a small bowl. And to this, I'm adding a little bit of diced red onion. Now, oftentimes I'll add in some corn to this. You could do avocado, diced peppers, but this is going to be a very, very simple black bean salad, and we'll just have this either over top of the enchiladas or we'll have it on the side. To that, I'm adding a little bit of olive oil as well as a little bit of lime juice. I have some dehydrated hot peppers, so I sprinkled a little bit of that in there along with some coarse salt, stirred that together, and that was it. This was a super simple meal, and definitely one of the reasons why I like to keep some protein cooked and ready to go on hand. It just makes things come together really quickly when you need it. I have been craving curry lately, so I'm going to be making a Thai green curry, and I'm just going to utilize a bunch of stuff that I had in the fridge and I needed to get used up. So I'm going to be doing some carrots in this curry. We're going to do some mushrooms, some onion, lots of garlic, and lots of fresh ginger. So just washing up those veggies. And this is going to come together really quickly. So I'm going to get my rice cooking first. And I always like to rinse my rice before cooking. It's just going to pull off some of that starch. And then adding that into a pot with some water and getting that cooking as normal. I'm doing basmati rice today. I'm doing a ton of fresh ginger, probably about a 3-inch piece or so, and I'm just mincing that really well. I'm also going to be mincing about 4 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to be thinly slicing a couple carrots and a bunch of mushrooms as well. Once my pan was nice and hot, I just added in a bit of fat. I'm just using butter today, and I'm going to get those carrots cooking first so they begin to soften along with the garlic and the ginger, and the mushrooms will go in a little bit later just so they don't get too soft. I had some red onion chopped and ready to go in the fridge, so that went in there. And then once those carrots start to soften a little bit, I'm going to add in the curry paste. Allow that to cook for a couple minutes, and then I'll add in the mushrooms. As those mushrooms begin to soften, I'm adding in the chicken. Again, I'm using some of that chicken that I had pre-cooked and ready to go, so I'm just chopping that up a little bit into a bit smaller pieces, but you could, of course, just use chicken breast and cook it up before you add in the veggies. I really don't use a recipe when I'm making curry. I like to use an entire jar of the Thai kitchen curry paste, whether I'm doing the red curry paste or the green curry paste, and then I do an entire can of full-fat coconut milk, and then it's usually just whatever veggies and whatever protein I have on hand. Allowed that to simmer for a while, and then I added the juice of an entire lime, allowed it to simmer a little bit longer, and then this was ready to serve. We had that basmati rice topped with the curry, and then last summer my mom was visiting and we had canned up some Thai chutney. It is a recipe from one of the ball canning cookbooks, and we made it just because I had some ingredients that I needed to use up. It's honestly probably not something that I'll can again, not because it's not good, it's just not something that we use a ton of, and I'm finding that I'm not rotating through it very often on the pantry shelf. there you have it, some of the meals that we had this week. Thank you for joining me in the kitchen, and I'll see you in the next video.